To start video, you got it. Okay. Like I said, you don't have to, but I thought we might just say hello to everybody quick. So, okay. Well, we'll get started. There may be a couple people jumping in and out, so we'll see. For those of you that don't know me, which I think probably just Kim, my name is Marsha Horning, and I direct the Snyder Leadership Legacy Fellows program here at K-State. I'm a faculty member here at Leadership Studies. I've been here for, gosh, almost 10 years, I think, in some capacity. So, and sitting by me over here is Andy Weefall, one of our professors here at Leadership Studies. He's going to do the bulk of the training. I'm just kind of going to do the beginning part. And then we have Ashley Anderson. So she's our resident fellow this year. So for the program, we're really fortunate that every year we're able to hire one of the graduating fellows, and they stay on with us for a year, helping to develop and offer the program. So so she'll be with us through next May. So yay, we're happy to have her. She'll be your main point of contact she'll email you a lot of documents and things like that during the year. You can always get a hold of me too, but she'll be your primary contact. So, all right. Did you all get that email I sent this morning with, it had a document that looks like this? No, okay, it's fine if you don't have it, but you will want it at some point in time. So, so I thought I'd start with just a quick overview of the program, especially because Kim's new to us, and Tracy, you're familiar but haven't coached with us before. So, so we started the Snyder Leadership Legacy Fellows program in 2015. So Katie Meek, who's with us here, was in our first class, and she was our first resident fellow. She's now at Junction City High School. And we have about 40 students in the program each year. It's a pretty competitive selection process. And really the goal of the program is for students to kind of help make the transition from college to whatever the next phase of their life might be. So these are all students from across campus. I think we've had students from every college now. They're all in their last year, so getting ready to make a pretty big jump here in the future. And as we were doing some strategic planning a few years ago, we realized that was a significant gap that we had, that students didn't feel like they were prepared to do that. At the same time, we had the opportunity to honor Coach Snyder, who's been part of Leadership Studies since the very, very beginning. So he, the proceeds from the first leadership lessons from Bill Snyder book, he let us use to buy furniture when we were across the street from campus in the two little houses, and he served on our advancement council for years. So we'd known for a long time that we wanted to have some kind of program to honor him and his work at some point. So it all kind of came together with the Snyder Fellows program. So some of the things that the students do throughout the year: we have a strong partnership with the City of Manhattan Parks and Recreation Department. So we coach just about all of the 3rd and 4th grade flag football, volleyball, cheerleading, and soccer for that age group, which has been a really good addition, I think, to the program. And of course, anything that has to do with Coach Snyder, I think mentoring with youth in the community is definitely something that we want to do. We have different workshops all throughout the year, so they vary from mindfulness, emotional intelligence, purposeful passion, risk-taking, ethics. We've got quite a extensive lineup this year. The students get to spend a lot of time with Coach Snyder. They get to connect with a lot of former K-State student athletes and have some unique opportunities for networking through that. And then one of the big components is that each of our students are paired with a leadership coach. So somebody to really walk with them through this final year as a student at K-State as they get ready to make that transition. So that's where you all come up. So we're happy that you're willing to work with some of our students this year. And we've found this to be one of the things on evaluations that are most meaningful for our students, to have somebody to just process, and work with them on whatever their goals might be and whatever they might be struggling with as they're getting ready to make a big jump in life. So, questions so far? I think I don't know what he's doing. I thought you were going like this, but okay. All right, well, let's start with just sort of the structure here. And if you do have that document I sent, I'm going to kind of loosely go over the first few pages, but it's not a big deal. So as far as just the general guidelines and structure, we think it's really important for the Snyder Fellow to be the driver of the relationship. So they're responsible to reach out and contact you and set up your first meeting. So we'll be getting together with them here in a couple of weeks and going over the expectations of what does it mean to have a coach and how do you interact with that person. So that should happen. If it doesn't, it's okay if you want to reach out or let Ashley or me know, and we will make sure that you hear from them. Most of the time, though, these are students that are pretty responsible, and I think you should be hearing from them soon. So we hope that you'll meet with your coachee between 6 and 7 times throughout the year, and that can be on the phone, that can be in person. That's kind of up to you. We can use, like we're doing now, we can use Zoom or FaceTime. So any format is fine with us. We ask that you typically plan on about 45 minutes to an hour for a session. Of course, again, that's up to you. So we will start coaching in September, and we'd like you to meet September, October, hopefully November, and then sometime there in December or January. And, students are gone for a long time, so that gets a little bit tricky. And then February, March, and April. And like I said, you can meet in any way you want. If you do end up where you want to take a student to lunch or dinner or coffee or something like that, you can get a receipt and we'll reimburse you for those expenses. So if you do that, just let us know and we'll be happy to pay for that. So what else? We, like I said, we'll try to help prepare our Snyder Fellows for making sure that they're prepared to make good use of the time with you. So hopefully there won't be too many struggles with that, and everybody will be on the same page. So that's just sort of the general expectations. When you do see the document I sent, there's sort of a spreadsheet that just walks you through the first couple of sessions. So basically, before the first meeting, we're going to ask you to complete just a quick little bio, and we'll send that to your coachee, and then we'll send you a bio of the person or people that you'll be coaching. So just take a peek at that before you get together the first time. And then at that first meeting, it won't be an actual coaching session as much as we just want you to spend some time getting to know that student and them getting to know you. I think what we realized the first year that we did coaching, we just kind of jumped right in, and folks felt like they hadn't had enough time to just build a relationship with their coach. So if you're in town and want to meet in person, I think that's a great time to just meet up for coffee or something like that. But just spend that time just getting to know them, and maybe some really high level, what are you hoping to do this year, or some of your big kind of goals, but probably don't dive into too deep that first time. So after that first meeting and before your second meeting, we'll send you a coaching prep form that you can send out to your coachee before every session. And so that just has some questions for them about, here's some opportunities I have right now. Here's some challenges that I have right now. And we'd like them to jot down some thoughts and ideally send that back to you before the next meeting, but at the very least to bring that with them so that we know that they've given some thought to how they want to use the time for each session. So if you could send that out beforehand, giving them a little time to prep on that, that would be awesome. So then at that second meeting, hopefully then they'll have some content to really dive into. And then after the second meeting and from then until the end of the year, we'll send you a survey link each month to both you and the coachee, and we ask that you complete that within a week or so of that meeting. So Ashley will be sending you lots of email or reminders about that. We do have some ongoing research that Brandon and Andy are both working on related to students' development across the years. So that's kind of one of the elements that the students will be a part of. So you want to say anything else about the research piece?
I think you got it.
Okay. Also at that first meeting, there's a really short coaching agreement. And I don't feel like this is something that you all need to sign or anything like that, but I do think it would be a good idea to just sit down for a couple of minutes and just talk through, that here's kind of the boundaries of our relationship. Here's how we'll get in touch with one another, whether that's email or phone. If I need to cancel, here's how I will do that. I put on there confidentiality. So please just know that students sometimes share a lot with you, and we ask that you don't share that unless you have a real concern that the student might need, mental health services or anything like that, please reach out to Ashley or me if you have concerns about a student. Let's see, I talked about the procedure that we would meet, usually 45 to 60 minutes, and you all can determine the time and the location and how that's going to go. And then the last thing I had on there was just if either of you have any concerns to reach out to Ashley or me. And then let's see, following that, I just had a little bit of information about getting to know one another. There's some suggested questions and things like that if you want to use them, but you certainly don't have to. And then we've got lots of other resources in this packet. There's a worksheet for students if they want to use them that has, here's my goals and sort of walking you through a coaching session. And Andy will talk to you more specifically about all of that here in a few minutes. And let's see, I have lots of coaching questions in here. So I think sometimes it's just good before a session to sit, and I usually review some of those questions just to kind of get my in the right mind frame for a coaching session. And then last, the very last page on there was just a poster with Coach Snyder's 16 goals for Wildcat success. So everything that we do in the program is based on Coach Snyder's 16 goals. So I thought maybe I should include those in case you're not familiar with them. So our students might talk to you about some of those goals and what they mean for them. You don't have to incorporate that into the sessions, but that was just for you all. And finally, payment. I just wanted to, there's a couple of different ways that will look. So if you work at K-State, payment will be $250 per student that you work with, and we normally process that at the end of May, and it'll just come in your paycheck. And I think sometimes people didn't realize, because it's by the time taxes are taken out, I think they didn't realize that they got paid. So we'll confirm that with you when that goes through, but that would be if you're a K-State employee. And so Kim, I think because you are not technically a K-State employee, and anybody else that's not a K-State employee, we will have you fill out a W-9 form, and you'll get a check straight from the Kansas State Foundation. So questions about any of that stuff? Nope. Okay. Well, then I think I'm going to just turn it over at this point to Andy, and he's going to get into what does coaching mean and all that good stuff. So take it away.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, so we're going to get started here. Okay, I need to share my screen.
Yes.
Where do I do that from?
Let's see. Right here.
Right there.
And then you can either share that or you can share the whole desktop.
Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to hit the presentation though?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go. Can you all hear him okay?
I can't see anyone.
We can't see you.
Can you see me? Okay, and you can see the PowerPoint. Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay.
Can everybody hear?
Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Great.
Awesome. All right, so sorry, we may have some more technical issues as we go on. Just please bear with us. This is the second time we've done this training through a video chat, but it's the first time that we're using Zoom. So we still may have some issues. I did want to talk about I remembered something about the coaching research that we're doing, and the main focus of that research is looking at something that we call coachability, and it really stemmed from our experience in the first couple years using coaching with the fellows and some of our experiences. And what we noticed is that some of the students seem to be more ready for coaching, and other students seem to be less ready. And over the years, we've kind of modified and adjusted how we've utilized coaching with the fellows. And the research is part of that. It's part of the way that we're making those adjustments. So we're learning as we go. So what we're going to do today is kind of our latest iteration based on some of the research and experience that we've had in the previous years of doing this work. So let's go on. So the first thing that we're going to talk about and maybe have you all share is what your experience with coaching is. So if you could just take a few minutes to maybe get a sheet of paper and jot down some of your notes, but think of a time when you've experienced really great coaching, and whether or not anyone called it coaching, and just however you think about coaching. It doesn't have to be the way that we think about it, but just how you in your mind think about coaching, and based on that experience, how would you define it? So if you could take a minute or two to write down your, it says leadership, it should say coaching. Write down your own definition of coaching.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fix it right now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. This is why I wish I had the two screens, because then I can see the. I know that's. Did I do something? I wonder why I can't see that. Like.
I wonder if we hit like escape. I click on view or something. Let's watch this.
Show video. There we go.
Much better. I don't know. So,
Well, you can have your laptop open with your two screens. Then you actually have three screens, which is how I've always done it in the past. Then you can have all this stuff over there. Would you, could we get maybe each person, since we've got just a few people, could each person share what they wrote, or what their notes say, or just what your experiences are?
I can do my experiences.
Thank you, Tracy.
The person I wrote down, I'm an attorney, and the person I wrote down was a judge who I've worked for the last couple of years. And she was a wonderful coach to me professionally, but some of the words I wrote down, she was both a professional mentor to me, but she was a great coach because she was good at talking to me about my career more holistically. She helped me make professional connections, but she also modeled how to use a legal career to make a bigger difference, or I guess to kind of see it as a way to accomplish bigger goals in life. And the other thing I wrote down was that I worked for her as I started my family, had my first child, and she was a wonderful coach to me by modeling to me how to prioritize, because she knew that family was my highest priority, but also how to be a wonderful professional at the same time. So she was probably my biggest coach in life so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I saw a lot of connections from what you described to how we think about coaching too. And even some connections to, so you brought up a good point, which is you mentioned mentoring a couple times when you talked about the judge that you work for. And the way we're going to talk about coaching here may be different than the way that you've thought of it in the past. But the way that Brandon and I and some others of us that have been trained on coaching, there's some very strict rules and kind of delineations between coaching and mentoring. But for this program, we're actually going to kind of blend the two between coaching and mentoring. But yeah, that was great. I really liked the thing that really resonated with me was how the person was able to kind of connect your career to your purpose and maybe some of the higher goals that you wanted to achieve besides just being successful in your career. That was really cool. Who'd like to go next?
I would love to share.
Thank you, Kim.
So the person that I thought of was more of a mentor role, but what she did really well was she guided. It was all about my goals, and through her coaching though, she also gave me room to become. It wasn't smothering. She let me go where I wanted to go with our sessions and with what I wanted to do. And then kind of like what you said, she invested in me personally, and she learned very quickly what was valuable to me. So in asking about my personal and professional life, she knew what was important, and also just other things. Like for me, it was important to be active, and she would always make sure that she checked in with me about how that was going, because it was valuable to my own mental health and self-care. So she did really good at connecting all aspects of life, but about what was valuable in my life. And then again, just giving me room to become what I wanted to be.
That's awesome. And there's a lot of connections between everything that you said and the way that we talk about coaching, and really the way that we want you to be with the fellows. And I mean, almost everything you said resonated with me, but the thing that resonated the most is that your mentor really focused on you. And that's what we want you to do with this program, is we want the fellow to really be the star of the relationship. Obviously the relationship, you are both play a big part in it, and you're partners in developing that relationship. But from a coaching standpoint, the way we talk about it is we really want the focus to be on the fellow. And your job as a coach is to give them that space and that room to grow and be. And that's one of the things I heard you say that your mentor did for you, Kim. And, you know, a lot of it is going to be you learning about the fellow, and just giving them space and time and room to talk about what they're going through. And a lot of the times the students are going to be able to figure out how to solve their own challenges without us kind of giving them what we think our solution would be. So that's awesome. I really appreciated that. Brandon or Katie, would you like to share?
I can go.
Thanks, Brandon.
So I was thinking of a colleague that I work with, and I was going through a particular period where I was thinking about my research agenda and where to, focus my attention. And this particular person, I think what they did were that they remained curious, they were compassionate, but they were also challenging, and they had built a rapport with me to really ask some questions that helped me think about the challenge I was facing from multiple perspectives. So I think for me, leadership coaching in the context that I've experienced, it was really a partnership that was informed by trust, but it often pragmatically played out as a dialogic exchange that included questions and, really intentional presence.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, some of the things that you said that really resonated for me and kind of how we think about coaching are being curious. And that's a big part of how we envision this coaching relationship, is that when you're in your kind of coaching mindset, you're really going to try to be curious about the fellow and kind of give them that space to talk about what's going on and talk through their challenges, but being curious and compassionate. And then also at times being challenging. And sometimes as a coach, you need to ask tough questions and maybe point out, tough truths. And really the judgment is on you as to when that needs to happen. And you're going to know when to be challenging with your fellow based on how well you know them and how long you've been in the relationship. You probably don't want to start off asking the tough questions in the first meeting. But over time, you're going to get a feel for the fellow that you're working with and be able to do that. Another thing that you said that was really important is partnership. And that is really how we want you to think about this relationship, is that you're partnering with the fellow and kind of going on this journey over the course of an academic year with them. And our guess is that both you and the fellow are going to grow a lot from the relationship, especially the more that you invest in that relationship, whether that investment is time and focus and energy and presence. That's really going to define how strong and valuable that relationship is. Katie, do you want to share?
Sure, I can. It'll sound pretty repetitive, but I went through leadership coaching as a Snyder Fellow, and something that it allowed me to do, or something my coach allowed me to do, is the space to kind of play with some mess that was going on at that time. They asked questions and then got out of the way and let me vocalize not only the reality I was seeing, but allowing me to think through what could things look like without limits, what could things look like if you went down all of these different paths. So it was not telling me what I should do, because my coach and I operated in totally different ways, but it allowed me to kind of think through for myself what could be what worked best for me at that time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, having experience going through the program and also as the, resident fellow for a year. And also I know you've been connected with the program even beyond that. So that's really cool. And, everything that you said and that others have said really connects with how we look at coaching. And this is the definition. Coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to their maximum potential, or to maximize their potential. And this is the definition given by the International Coach Federation. The International Coach Federation is probably the international organization that credentials coaches. And some of us here at the Staley School are in process of earning the credential from the ICF. Brandon and I are kind of on track to go through that training, and others are going to go through it as well. Brandon and I were both trained, went through some coaching training at the Kansas Leadership Center, and continued that training most of the academic year last year. And so the training that we're doing today is we're gonna talk about sort of the strict ICF coaching model. And we're going to talk about that because there's some really important points and some really important ideas that the ICF's coaching model really explains really well. Although the training that you're getting today is not going to credential you. I just want to be really clear about that. And also, we're not going to ask you to do really strict ICF model coaching in your relationship with the fellow, because we just want to train you on what it means to be more coach-like, because what we believe is that is a really good way to develop and foster a really strong relationship and partnership with the fellow. And it's a really good and useful skill to have as you're working with a fellow, and probably in the rest of your life as well, both personal and professional. But there are going to be times when you're talking to your fellow when maybe they really just want advice. Maybe they really need mentoring, which is different than coaching. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But there may be times when your fellow that you're working with really needs advice. They really need mentoring. And it's really going to be up to you and kind of your own judgment as to when you want to be more coach-like and when you want to be more mentor-like. And there may be things in throughout the course of the year when Marcia and Ashley are going to ask you to maybe be more mentor-like when you're working with your fellow. So the coaching is a really abstract and kind of obtuse concept. So sometimes it helps people to think about what it's not. And that's what the next slide is about. So coaching is not facilitating. Facilitating is moving a group through specific content to a specific outcome. And really that's what we're doing today, or what I'm doing. I'm facilitating you all through this content on coaching. And it's a way to train and get people familiar with some concepts, but I'm not coaching right now. Excuse me. Coaching is also not mentoring. That's imparting knowledge on another to guide them based on your own personal experiences. And again, there may be times when you need to kind of switch roles and go from coaching to mentoring. And we can keep talking about that as we go through the training. Coaching is also not counseling or therapy. Therapy and counseling really are more about how the past relates to the present and providing emotional support and providing empathy. Although this one can get really tricky because coaching a lot of times can dance right up to the line of counseling and therapy, and you just need to be really careful about when that happens. And so if you start feeling uncomfortable about what a fellow is going through, and if they start sharing some trauma, or if you feel like you're starting to get into the counseling or therapy role, and this has happened to me a lot. And so when I notice that happening, I'll say, okay, we're getting into an area where I'm not qualified to help you. And we're talking more about counseling or therapy. And what I'll do is I'll direct the student to the resources that we have here on campus to help and assist those students. And again, this is a judgment call, but if you feel like you're starting to get into the therapy or counseling realm, then really what we need to do is maybe talk to Marcia and Ashley, and they can get in touch with the student and make sure that they're getting the help that they need. And that's not really our job as coaches for the fellows, coaches and mentors. We can go between the coaching and the mentoring role. But if any of us ever feel like we're getting into that counseling role, then we kind of need to just take a pause and maybe stop what's happening and make sure that we're getting in touch with Marcia and Ashley and helping direct that student to the right resources. Lastly, coaching's also not consulting. Consulting is, when an expert comes in and gathers data, assesses the data, evaluates information, and then gives a recommendation. So we're not going to do that. With coaching, we're really letting the fellow or the student work through their own leadership challenges, their own issues that they're facing, and some of it may be personal. And in our experience, the fellows do, as they get to know us, they do start to share really personal things. And again, we need to make sure that that's confidential. But we just really want them to kind of work through that on their own. So I'm going to take a pause for a second, and could maybe each one of you maybe just say either if you have a question or maybe just share what's resonating with you, or what your thoughts are at this point as we're kind of talking about coaching.
Hello, Andy.
Hey, Brandon. Thank you.
This is Brandon. I was just thinking when you were going over the distinctions of facilitating, mentoring, and counseling and consulting, it was particularly helpful when you highlighted the counseling component. I think in the past when I've done coaching work with students here at K-State, there have been times when I've been trying to, in some ways acknowledge when I should stop a coaching session or acknowledge a coaching session and maybe refer a student to campus services. And so the distinction that you had around counseling really helped me think about some past experiences, but also in a way that's allowed me to kind of, think about this moving forward in helpful ways to know when it's appropriate to refer a student.
Yeah, and coaching is closest to counseling on this list. That's the one where, because with coaching, we do need to be empathetic. We do need to provide empathy. We need to provide support. We need to be there for the student that we're working with. That's all very similar to counseling. And I heard a great analogy about how to differentiate coaching and therapy. And so if you think about you're walking side by side with your fellow, and that's kind of the metaphor for the relationship for both counseling and coaching. And you come up to, there's a hole in the ground. And we see that hole, we're going to recognize it in both roles, in both a counseling and a coaching role. In a coaching role, we're going to look at the hole and acknowledge it and maybe talk about it, but we're actually just going to walk around it. The hole represents something from the past. A therapist is going to look at the hole and go into it and maybe try to fill it up. So we're not going to do that as coaches. That we're getting into territory that we're just not qualified to handle. We've got to go back and get a different degree if we want to do that. Kim, can you maybe share your thoughts, just what you're thinking or what's resonating with you?
To me, what is really standing out is in the mentoring definition where it says imparting knowledge. And that is just sticking out to me because I think that is such a common reaction, especially for professionals who like to help. Like I'm in student services, and that's why I do this, because I want to help students. But the thing is, with that coaching role, it's partnering, and just so that's just standing out to me. I wrote that down, highlight, underline. So I think that will be a distinction that I know that all have to be very mindful of when I am coaching students.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's also, what do I want to say? It can be a big hurdle for some of us to withhold imparting that knowledge, because in our conversations with people, when someone's sharing a leadership challenge with us, and if you're like me, your natural instinct is going to be to hear the leadership challenge, interpret it, and solve it. And it happens really quickly. Because you're in your mind, that's what you're doing. You're processing. You're like, okay, I got it. I've had a similar situation. Here's how I handled it. And you really want to share that. And I think that's really common for a lot of us. And it's a skill that we need to practice to kind of withhold doing that. If we're going to be in our coaching role, and if we're trying to be more coach-like. Because if we're coaching, then we're not going to be imparting our knowledge. We're not going to be interpreting someone's situation and then sharing how we think we would solve it, or, you know, walking them through our own personal experiences. Because we want to do that. I think it's natural that we just want to share those things because we want to help people. And that's probably why a lot of us are in the jobs that we're in, is that we want to help people. We want to share our knowledge. But if we're being coach-like, and if we're in the coaching role, we really need to hold the person up as a whole person and let them work through whatever it is they're working through. Tracy, do you want to share maybe what you're thinking?
Sure. I don't have a lot to add to what Kim just said, other than that is really what stuck out to me too. I've been a part of so many formal mentorships where the goal was to partner with somebody that had been through similar experiences and could help you through them, that I think that I am shifting my thinking about this relationship and distinguishing it from a mentorship role. And it's also resonating to me to think about some of the less formal aspects of those relationships I've had that are more about the whole person and less about, for example, the professional mentorship portions. So I agree with Kim. This is going to be something that is shifting my thinking.
Yeah, awesome. I know when I first was kind of exposed to what coaching was, from one of my colleagues here, Mary Kay Seifers, who I know some of you know. She's kind of all of our coach here at Leadership Studies. It's been a process for me to kind of build the skill of holding the other person up as a whole person and a creative person and someone that is fully capable of working through their own challenges. And because my natural instinct and just kind of my natural way of being is to, I want to give my knowledge. I want to share what I've been through. And you know, the hope there, maybe unconsciously, is that I want to help the other person. I'm going to help the other person. But you probably all agree too that when we learn the best lessons is when we figured it out for ourselves. Okay, I'm going to go on. Katie, did you want to share, or you good? All right, right on. Okay, so just a little bit about how we envision the relationship is that it's going to be kind of a blend of coaching and mentoring. And this is a result of kind of our 3 years of experience of having these relationships and providing coaching to the fellows. And part of this has to do with some of the things that we found in the research that we've done with the Snyder Fellows. And so one of the concepts that we've kind of been researching is this idea of coachability and how coachable a student is, or how coachable a person is. Because in our experience, there's been a wide variety of how coachable a student or a fellow is, or really how ready for coaching are they. Because not every student is ready for a kind of strict coaching relationship. And for a lot of reasons. It could be just who they are as a person. It could be what they're used to or what their experiences are. Or they just really want advice. They want that mentor. So what we're going to do with this program is going to be kind of a blend of coaching and mentoring. The rest of the training that we're going to do after this slide is going to be strict coaching. We're not going to talk about mentoring after this, because the mentoring side is probably going to be pretty easy and natural for you. You have experiences and expertise and a lot of knowledge. And if you're going to be in that mentor role, it's probably going to be pretty easy for you to share that, and to help students when they want the mentoring and maybe when you feel like they need it. The coaching is the part that I think all of us can become better at and develop skills in. And again, it's going to be kind of your judgment about when you're going to be in one role or the other, or when you need to be more coach-like, or when you need to be more mentor-like. And there may be things that the program initiates that is going to ask you to step into that mentor role, whether it's looking at their resume, or helping them prep for career day, or helping them get ready for an interview. There may be times when you really need to be more of a mentor than a coach. So does anyone have any questions at this point, or when it might be more appropriate to be more coach-like versus more be a mentor? Everyone good? Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so this slide is, we call them the coaching cornerstones. And I'm going to talk about each of these bullet points. The first bullet point is, for me, probably the most important. And we call this our coaching stance. And what I mean by that is it's your attitude towards the fellow, towards the student. It's your perspective, and it's about how you're viewing the person that you're trying to coach. And if we're going to be coach-like, and if we're going to be in our coaching role, we want to view the person that we're working with as a naturally creative, a resourceful, and a whole person. And if we view them that way, then we're going to treat them that way too. And that's how we want to treat them. We want to treat them as if they're naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, because they are. And for me, it's helpful to think about, my coaching stance almost in the opposite of this. So if you think about how would you treat someone if you viewed them as if they were not creative, they're not resourceful, and that they're deficient in some way. And, think about the times that you've been treated as if you were deficient, as if you cannot solve your own problems. And how did you feel when someone treated you that way? And is that the way that you want to treat other people? And for me, it's, no, I don't want to be treated that way. And it feels like crap when someone does treat me that way. And it's actually angers me and kind of turns me off. If someone treats me as if I'm deficient in some way, that takes away from the relationship that I have with that person. And I know that in the times that I've treated someone as if they were deficient, that I've not added anything to that relationship and probably taken something away from it. And it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. One of the most subtle ways is just by giving advice, which is something that we don't want to do if we're being like in the strict coach role. Because the implied message of giving the advice is you need the advice and you need my expertise to help you work through this problem, which is in a way treating someone as if they're deficient. And I remember when Brandon and I were at the KLC going through the coaching intense training that we had. It was a week long. It was 8 hours a day. We had a lot of practice coaching, and some of the practice coaching was with a trainer sitting right next to you watching you coach another person. And I remember one time I was coaching someone and had one of the trainers sitting right next to me, which is like really nerve-wracking just to have someone there watching you do it anyway. But the person I was coaching was talking about a challenge that they were facing. And in my mind, I had already solved the challenge that they were facing. And this is how I let the advice sneak out. I just asked the person, have you thought about, and before I got anything else out, the trainer that was sitting next to me said, don't give advice. And for me, I didn't feel like I was giving advice. I was just asking a question. But if you think about it, have you thought about doing whatever to solve whatever challenge is actually kind of a really subtle way of giving advice. And in that moment, I had lost my coaching stance. I had gotten away from my coaching stance. I wasn't viewing the person that I was coaching as a whole creative, resourceful person anymore. Because they needed me to offer that advice. That was kind of the perspective I was coming from. Not intentionally, it just came out. Okay, so kind of moving on from that, we're going to come back to that coaching stance because it's super important. Another way to say that first bullet point, to hold that person as naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, is to hold the person you're working with in unconditional positive regard. Hold the person in unconditional positive regard. And if you can do that, then you're going to be in a much better position to let them work through what they're working through than you stepping in and giving advice. The second one, the most powerful coaching agenda, is going to come from the fellow. Again, that's, letting the fellow set the agenda because they know what's important to them. They know what's most important to them. And our job as the coach is to help them. They probably already have it figured out, but if not, to help them figure it out. Coaching addresses the whole life. Your students are probably going to come to you, your fellows are going to come to you with a specific thing or maybe a specific aspect of their life that they want to talk about. But a lot of times with coaching, as you develop the relationship and kind of get deeper into a coaching relationship, what you're going to figure out is that the thing that they started talking about is not really the thing that is the issue. And the way that we talked about this in our coaching training was your job as the coach is to get to the thing that's behind the thing. Because for a lot of us, sometimes there's a thing behind the thing that's really driving an issue that we're having. It could be an issue with a coworker or a project you're working on or a roommate or a friend or a family member. And a lot of times we see things just from our perspective and our own interpretation, but it's maybe not the right one. Our job as the coach is to kind of help peel away those layers and figure out what is the real issue. The second to last bullet point, the coach and client share responsibility for the relationship, that kind of goes back to some of the things that we talked about when I had you share your own definition of leadership. And some of you mentioned a partnership, and that's really what a coaching relationship is. It's a partnership, and both of you are going to share responsibility for that relationship. The last point is coaches keep their own issues to themselves. Oh, thank you. And this one is really important, and it really ties back to the first point, which is holding our fellow up in unconditional positive regard, holding them up as creative, resourceful, and whole. And we want to keep our own issues to ourselves and not let those kind of creep in, because that's going to kind of distort the relationship, and it's going to take the focus away from the person that you're coaching. And I can go back again to some of the things that you talked about. I was kind of jotting some notes down when you were sharing what your definitions of coaching were and kind of your experiences with them. And one of the things you said, Kim, was that the person that helped you the most really focused on you, and maybe didn't bring their own stuff to when they were working with you. And that's how we want to be as coaches. We want to keep our own issues to ourselves, and not share like, oh, well, I also have that same issue and here's my story about it. When we do that, we take the focus of the conversation away from the fellow and we bring it to us. And it's sort of like, it's like, okay, we're done talking about you. Let's talk about me, and let's bring the focus to me. And we don't want to do that if we're being coach-like. So we want to keep the focus on the fellow. I'm going to take a pause here, and could maybe everyone just share really quickly any questions that you have or what's resonating with you?
I'll share something resonating with me.
Thank you.
Thinking about the whole person, I think something I try to work on is thinking about what else might be going on in that person's life rather than attributing it just to the situation. So something that resonated with you, that you said, was trying to explore the thing behind the thing and trying to think of all the circumstances that might be playing into an issue that someone is having.
Yeah, for sure. Kim, what are you thinking about right now?
I think a lot of what I wrote down, the same thing that Tracy just echoed, about getting to the thing behind the thing. And I think also what resonated with me when you were talking, Andy, about with your coaching trainer sitting right next to you, and like you had already solved the problem in your head, and just being mindful of you have to listen to all aspects of it so you can get to the thing behind the thing. So again, that whole aspect of you being mindful as the coach, but then still being an active listener.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And, one of the things I was just thinking about is, for me, it's harder to maintain that coaching stance the more I care about the person. So the stronger the relationship I have, the harder it is for me to not give advice, for me to not share my own story. And this happens all the time for me with my kids, who I love, more than anything. And so it's hard for me to just not jump in and tell my kids when they're doing something wrong, or when I think they're doing something wrong, or when they need my advice, or when I feel like they're not focused on the right thing. So my youngest daughter is starting K-State in the fall, and she's moving to the dorms, not this weekend, but next weekend. And so she's super focused on what her dorm room is going to look like and how to decorate it. And for me, that's just the wrong thing. She doesn't need to be focused on that. And we've actually had arguments about it. But in those moments, I was not treating her as a whole person, as naturally creative or resourceful. It was just really hard for me. And it was hard for me to maintain my coaching stance in that situation. And probably will be forever. Okay, we can move on. So these are the core values of coaching. The first one is confidentiality. And again, the fellow that you work with more than likely is going to share very personal things with you. And we need to keep those things confidential. So, I don't go home and talk to my wife about, oh, I had this coaching session, the student shared this, and whatever. So I gotta keep those things confidential, and I don't talk about them at home or with my colleagues. I may talk about, in general, frustrations or issues that I'm having, but I'm not going to gossip about what a student shared with me. So we need to keep those things confidential. And that's one of the most important values we need to uphold if we're going to have that coaching relationship. And I would say even with a mentoring relationship, we should probably just keep that confidential too. Non-judgment, so not judging someone about what they're talking about or going through or what we think of them as a person. And again, this one's really hard because it's super easy for us to kind of slide into the judgment. Because I think for a lot of us, it's just a natural reaction. We start hearing about someone's challenge or we get to know a person. And we're going to start judging them or judging their issue or their lack of ability to solve a challenge that they're going through. Once we do that, though, we've lost our coaching stance. And I'm just going to go back really quick. It's that first bullet point. That's our coaching stance. As soon as we slide into judgment, we've lost the coaching stance. And if you ever notice yourself doing that as you're working with a student, okay, you need to give yourself some grace for sliding into that, but just notice it and just kind of refocus back to what your coaching stance should be. Just say, okay, I noticed that I was judging the student there in that moment and I lost focus. I lost my coaching stance for a moment, but let's bring it back and maybe refocus. And that happens to me all the time when I'm coaching. I'll catch myself being judgmental and I'll just have to stop and kind of check in with myself okay, let's get back to the coaching stance and let's focus on the person that we're supposed to be coaching. Another core value is being curious. And for me, that's a really good cue to be present and to keep the focus on the fellow. So a lot of times when I'm starting a coaching session, I'm going to do a couple things. I usually have some notes around me about sometimes about the fellow that I'm going to be coaching. I may have some questions already written out, or I do have a lot of coaching materials just because I've gone through a lot of training and have some books about it. So a lot of times I'll just have all my stuff out just to be ready. But also I'll just write a note on a piece of paper just so I can see it, and I'll just write, be curious. Or I'll just kind of be thinking about that. Just be curious. And for me, if I'm in the mindset of being curious, it really helps me ask questions, and it really helps me think of questions to ask about whatever the challenge is. And so that's a really helpful cue for me, is just to be curious. And it really keeps the focus on the fellow, and it puts you in that mindset of keeping that focus on the fellow. The last one is also really hard, especially the more that you care about the person, but having a lack of attachment to the outcome. When I think about Cassie, my daughter, who's going to school here in the fall, there's just no way that I can not be attached to the outcome because I care about her so much and I want the best for her. But when I'm attached to the outcome, I'm also not holding her up as a whole person, that she can figure out what is best for her. And she's an adult now, and but it's really hard for me to kind of not be attached to the outcome. And my guess is that you're going to run up against this issue as well, especially the better you get to know your fellow. You're going to know what their goals are. what they want out of what they want for their future career, and you're going to want those things for them. But they also may change what they want. And so for us, we need to have this lack of attachment to the outcome, and really that's holding them up as a whole person, because they can figure out what outcome is best for them. It may not be the outcome that you think is the best for them, but we need to hold them up as a whole person. And if we're doing that, then they're the ones that are going to be best able to figure out what's the best outcome. Could we take a pause again and maybe get some thoughts about maybe your past experiences with some of these things, or I don't know, what are you thinking about right now? Brandon, maybe do you want to start just to talk about your experience, maybe because you've got quite a bit of experience coaching, and maybe how you've kind of dealt with these issues?
Yeah, Andy, I appreciate the comment you made about how you approach a coaching session. I think for me in the past, whether it's in person or over the phone or over Zoom, it seems like it's helpful to do some I wouldn't say ritual, but in some ways it's kind of like having a ritual process that you prepare. And I like some of the ideas that you had of like having a little note that said, be curious. But I also think, for me, one of the things I do is I try to clear my working space, and then I'll have like just a notepad that's blank. And then as they're going through the coaching process, I'll just try to like make really quick notes that help me focus on what the issues are. So like one of the things that I do is, when the coachee, sets an agenda for the session, I'll like write down a keyword and circle that, so that as we're going through the session, if I feel like, we're kind of losing track, I'll try to ask a question that brings it back to that purpose. So I appreciate you offering that framework of how you prepare, because I think that gave me some ideas of things that I can integrate into my existing practice.
Yeah, awesome. Another thing that I'll do that you reminded me of is, and this has to do with letting the fellow set the agenda, is whatever they want to talk about for that day. I'll start off by saying, what do you want to talk about today, or what do you want to work on? And then I'll write that thing down and I'll draw a heart around it. And I'll know that that's what I need to keep focused on, kind of like what you were saying too. Katie, what are you thinking about?
I know you had mentioned it with how you operate with Cassie, but I know that given my background as an educator and my background with the program, separating myself from the outcome of that fellow is very, very difficult. So you had kind of talked through some of the things, but are there other things that other coaches have done to really try and separate my desire for that person and the outcome of their future from the coaching session itself?
Yeah, I think, the thing to keep in mind is just go back to your coaching stance, and, we need to hold the fellow, the students, the people that we're working with in unconditional positive regard. And if we're doing that, then we can hopefully feel a little more at ease with the idea that they can decide what's best for them. They can figure out the best outcome. But you're right, it's really, really hard. And it's a skill to practice. And what I'll say is, in those moments, and in those moments when we want to give advice, or when we want to share our experience, or when we want to say, hey, you really need to focus on this because this is important and this is going to help you get to where you want to go or where you want to be, we need to recognize what we're doing. And we need to just say, I just lost my coaching stance. I'm not holding this person up as a whole person. and just kind of refocus, and sometimes you can do that just internally. That's kind of what I do. It's still hard though. I wish I had a magic answer for it. What are some other thoughts? Maybe some of you can kind of share like how we can get back on track with that. Those are kind of my thoughts, but it's really hard. It's the closer someone is to me, like with my family, that's when it's hardest. And probably for you, Katie, with the students that you teach, it can probably be really hard too. Especially when you see someone doing something that you're like, I know that that's not right. And I know that that's going to turn out badly for you. And you're going to find out one way or another. It's hard. Yeah. Tracy, what are you thinking about? What's going through your mind?
I really like the idea of having a note to myself to always be curious. I think that's a great way to approach this. As you were talking about being non-judgmental, I think when I am in these situations, I have a tendency to try to put myself in someone's shoes. But I think what that really causes me to do is take my perspective of their issue, and instead I'd like to try to focus on just asking more questions and hearing more about what their perspective actually is, not what my perspective would be if I were in that situation.
Yeah, that's a great point to tie back to being curious, because I think that's super like easy and natural for us, is to share our perspective, our interpretation of what the person's situation is. And if we're being curious, we're going to want to know more about their perspective. And you could even say, hey, tell me more about that. Help me understand that better. And one of the things I think that does, if we're being curious, if we're asking questions, if we're trying to understand a person's perspective better, what that demonstrates is that we care about the person. And I think that's super important too, to kind of demonstrate that you care about the person. For me, the best way to do that, or a great way to do that, is to be curious and to ask questions about a person's perspective, to ask them to share more about what they're talking about, because you're holding them up as a whole person. And for me, you're demonstrating that caring and that empathy. How about you, Kim? Are you able to make any connections with this to?
Yeah, two things kind of stood out to me through some of the discussion too, though, is the one was about, our natural inclination to try to give advice. And I think what I'm going to have on my note is experiential learning. And it's one thing to tell someone something, but that person has to go through it. So kind of, Andy, how you were giving the example, I know they're going down the wrong path, but if they don't go down the wrong path, they don't remember this moment as feel, you remember that feeling. So that's just something that I know that I'll try to keep in mind. And then the other thing too, kind of piggybacks off of Andy, what you were saying with asking questions and how to the person it makes them feel like you care. I was just kind of thinking how are you going to make or help create this culture in your meetings with your fellow that it is a confidential space, that it is safe and non-judgmental. So you just kind of made me think of it's one thing for me to say in our first meeting, just so you know, everything's confidential, but it's another thing to make that person feel that way when they are sitting with you or on the phone with you or something like that. So I don't have a solution or anything, but you just kind of made me think about how to live these and not just say them as values.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Just a couple things, and you tell me if I'm on the right track or if this resonates with you. I think we should say those things in the first meeting and maybe every meeting.
Yeah.
Remember, this is confidential, but also the feeling and kind of the relationship where someone feels or that they know that it's confidential probably is going to take time. And for some students, it's going to happen quicker than others. And a lot of that for me has to do with just how your kind of personalities sync up, I guess. I think for some students, you're going to just immediately kind of be right there and have a great relationship. And for others, it could take more time. I don't know. What do you think? What are some other ways maybe that we could really foster that that caring relationship and just having the student know that it's confidential?
I think too, with the combination of confidentiality and non-judgment too, like even how you mentioned clearing off your desk space and just having that notepad, or like things such as your nonverbals, like when they say that thing that they're thinking about doing that could lead them down what you think is the wrong path, like what is your facial expressions? Like
Right.
things like that. And just like, I mean, there's people that you click with right away, and a lot of that has to do with your energy that you have when someone walks through the room or what they get from your nonverbals. So I know that's one thing that I try to be very aware of when I meet with students, when I advise them, and I think the same is going to be very relevant in this situation as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that's great advice, to clear things away. If you're like me, you're always on your phone. And if I know I'm going to be in a coaching session, then I need to put my phone away where I can't even see it. Like in a drawer or something like that, because that's something that can really distract me and really gives that nonverbal cue of I'm not paying attention, and maybe even deeper, I don't care. Yeah, Marcia was just saying that a lot of us will put a note on our door like meeting in progress or do not disturb or a coaching session or Zoom meeting, conference call, whatever it is. Yeah. Should we take a break maybe for 5 or so minutes?
I think so.
Let's do that. We'll take a quick break for 5 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and keep going with the training. Does that sound good? Awesome. Thank you all. Okay, is everyone ready to get started again?
No.
Kim's not. We'll just wait another minute. We're waiting for Kim. Kim, are you? Oh, cool. Can we get started?
We're good to go.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. We're gonna move on, page down. Oh, that didn't work. There we go. I may kind of skip through some of the slides, just depending on where we are, and some of the stuff we've kind of talked about quite extensively. And this is one of those that I think we may not need to spend a ton of time on. But this one's about building trust and co-creating the relationships. And it's really important to build trust. And, how can we build trust? We have to, make sure that we keep it confidential. One of the things I tell my students about building trust, since I teach leadership classes, and we teach leadership here, and trust is a big part of leadership. A great way to build trust is to do what you say you're going to do, and that takes time. It takes experience. It doesn't happen overnight, and we just need to know that. We need to be consistent. We also need to show genuine concern. Part of that's being curious, but it's also, we really should care about the students that we're going to be working with. And I know that we all do. You wouldn't have volunteered to be a coach if you didn't care about students, and if you didn't care about this program and the students that are going to be participating in it. And I know we all do. We just need to, make sure that we're showing that too. We need to create a safe and supportive environment. Again, for us, and from a coaching perspective, using the coaching skills is really going to help you create that self and supportive environment. And then the 5 elements of trust: confidentiality, sincerity, competence, reliability, and involvement. Those are all things that factor into building a trusting relationship. Okay, I'm going to have to remember. It's hard for me to remember all the slides and the sequence of them. Okay, so another way to talk about coaching is it's really about being an empathetic listener, and being an active listener. That's really kind of a huge part of coaching. So these are all just some of the things on this list are skills that we can practice, or for us to try using in our coaching relationships, and others are just advice. Some of them we've already talked about. The second bullet point there, listen to understand, not to reply. That's something I talk about in almost all the classes that I teach. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just write that on the board: listen to understand versus listen to reply, and then I'll have students talk about it. And for me, this is another good cue. And sometimes I'll think about this. It really ties in with being curious. If we're being curious, then we are listening to understand. We want to know more about what the person is saying. If we're listening to reply, that means we're just kind of half listening. It's like, okay, what are they talking about? What are my experiences about that thing? And then I'm just immediately going to share them. And if we're doing that, what we're doing is we're taking the focus away from the fellow or the person or student, and we're putting it back on us. And what it demonstrates is that we're not really listening, and that we don't really care about whatever it is the person's talking about. What we really care about is what our experience was. We've talked about being curious a lot this morning, so I don't feel like we need to go over that. And one of the things someone else mentioned was, observing the body language, observing the body and the words. And most of you could probably tell, if someone is checked out or if they're nervous. Another one is to be observant of the person you're coaching. And I remember when Brandon and I were at the coaching training, I was doing a practice session, and I was actually coaching one of the trainers. And I remember when she started talking about one thing, there was just like a noticeable shift in, I can't remember what it was. It was her facial expression. I just remember noticing that something had changed, and it wasn't anything she was saying. But whatever she was talking about, was really striking a chord with her. And so when she finished, I mentioned it. I was like, I noticed this, something changed when you started talking about this. Can you say more about that? And for that session, it was like a really important move and kind of thing to notice. But we should be observing, and that's part of our presence as coaches. And we want to be present. We want to be focused on not only on what they're talking about, but on the person too. And this is kind of goes back to that coaching the whole person. But we need to be observant of, the body language, what's going on, and then exploring, if we notice something. We have talked about not giving advice, but it hasn't been explicitly said. And this is going to be a judgment call, because for this program, we're not asking you to be a strict coach, and there is going to be some overlap with mentoring. And if you're going to be more in the mentor mode, then we do, then it's going to be something that you should do. You should give advice if you're going to be more of a mentor. And you should share your experiences. If they bring in their resume and want to go through it with you, then that's probably a time when you do want to give advice and share your experiences. If they're talking about a different challenge or one where they can work through it, then you really should try to be more coach-like and maybe stay away from the advice. The reason we don't give advice in coaching is it kind of goes against what our coaching stance is. By giving advice, we're actually viewing the person and treating them as if they're deficient, as if they need it. And we're not holding them up as a whole person who can figure out what they need to do. Another really important part of coaching is silence, is valuing and using silence. And again, this is a skill that can be hard for some of us to develop. It can be hard to, usually when this happens is you ask a question and the person you're talking to just doesn't say anything. And in those moments, it can be really hard to keep quiet or to not re-ask the question a different way. For me, one of my big issues is I ask questions and then I answer them right away. I do that in class all the time. I'll throw a question out to the group and then I'll just answer it. So that's like something that I've had to work on over the years, is really valuing and using that silence. And one way for me that I've that's helped me kind of use the silence is to know that if they're not saying anything, they're probably thinking about it, and they're probably thinking about how they want to answer it. And the longer you're silent, the more it's going to challenge them to think deeply about whatever it is you're talking about or whatever it is that you ask them. And a lot of times when you kind of wait out the person you're talking to, it usually leads to like a much deeper conversation, and a lot more progress can be made when you do value and use that silence. But sometimes it can be kind of a test of wills, and you just need to win those battles. Another one is, we call it one-upping, or saying me too. And this is something that I also struggle with a lot, especially if someone starts talking about something that's really interesting to me, or if someone starts talking about something I'm really into. It's going to be really hard for me not to one-up, or I don't think I'm one-upping. What I think I'm doing is I think I'm sharing my experience about something they're talking about as a way to connect with the person. And that's kind of a really easy trap to fall into, is we think that when we're sharing our experience, we're connecting with the person, but really what we're doing is we're bringing the focus back to us and away from the person that we're talking to. Even just saying, someone says, oh, I am having a problem with a roommate that I'm working through. As soon as you say me too, you've kind of deflated the importance of what they're talking about and how meaningful it is to them. And it's another way to kind of shift focus back to you. And for some people, this can be a hard one to get over and a hard one to process, because I think it is really natural for us to think that by sharing our story that we're connecting with the person. And if we're being in our coaching stance, then it's easier for us to see that what we're doing is we're shifting the focus back to us, and we're actually we're not connecting. We're doing the opposite. Okay, and then the last point is a skill of basic listening, which is mirroring back. And this is just a great technique to use when you're trying to be coach-like, when you're talking to a fellow or a student. They share a story with you, and you just repeat the story back to them in your own words. And so that's what mirroring back is. You're just going to kind of repeat back to them what you heard them say. So you could say something like, okay, what I'm hearing you say is, and then you just kind of repeat back in your own words what you thought the person said. It demonstrates that you're listening. Even if you got it wrong, it gives the person a chance to correct you and to make sure that you're on the right track. It's a great way to check in, and it's a great way to make sure that you're focused on the other person. Could I pause for a second and maybe get some of you to share out, what you're thinking about? Is anything resonating with you, or is anything you have a question about, or anything like that? I'm going to mute myself so maybe some others could talk.
So this resonated with me, and you're mirroring what you've heard. I help with the National Crisis Text Line, and that is one of the things that they really emphasize, like paraphrasing or basically amplifying what the person has told you, just with stronger vocabulary. And this is all through texting. So I'm pretty excited to actually get to practice that in this setting. So, but I mean, every time I'm like, this is when I'm like doing it, I'm like, this is so dumb that I'm just repeating what they've said just in different terms. And it's just, they go, yes, and da 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 da. And it's amazing the response that you get. So I kind of just wanted to echo that, just because I know at first when I was being trained to do that, I was like, this seems awkward to me. And it's not at all. And it's always been useful to getting deeper into something when you've echoed stronger words. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you. That's awesome. And I'm excited for you to, do this in real life also, or person to person, I guess. And, you know, for me, like I'm more of an introverted person. And so I need like all these extra tips on how to keep the conversation going. And so mirroring back is something that's really helped me in coaching sessions, even just in personal conversations, you know, with friends and family and stuff. Tracy, what about you? What's going on? What are you thinking about?
I think that these are great skills, and I guess what's resonating with me is that these are ways of showing the person you're talking to that you care and you're interested in what they're saying and then their story. I think I have a tendency to think that they want a response, like, for example, advice or a reply to what they're saying, but these are other ways to practice showing that you care about the content without necessarily providing anything in return, just having the conversation and being an active listener.
Yeah, for sure. And if we can do these things through the course of a session with a student, a fellow, or even just a conversation with a person, my guess is that they're going to figure out a plan of action for whatever challenge it is that they're dealing with.
Andy, I'm still going to participate. I'm going to stay muted and go get the baby and bring him in here, but I'm still participating if you're.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and feel free to put that little nugget on the screen.
Andy, one of the things that you said in the last portion that really resonated with me was how to use silence. And it made me think about, you know, maybe some new strategies to use silence in different coaching contexts, whether it be in person in my office or over the phone or over Zoom. And so I think I appreciated the perspective because it's going to be one of the things that I'm going to try to watch more about when I'm coaching this next semester with the different formats and how I can better use silence in those different contexts, because I think it's experienced in different ways.
Can you maybe say a little more about what you might want to try?
Yeah, well, so I think in some ways, I think when I'm coaching in person, I actually think sometimes I have a harder time holding silence compared to when I'm maybe talking over the phone, because silence when I'm talking over the phone seems to just be a communication pattern that has been practiced, so it seems more natural. So I think one of the things that I want to try to translate is I actually think in some ways I do better holding silence when it's over the phone as opposed to coaching in person. So I want to just be more attentive to that this semester when I'm doing coaching with students, to try to translate how I use silence over the phone in a lived experience type of coaching session.
Cool, thank you. One of the things since I started coaching training, and this has like been a, I don't know, 3, 4, 5-year journey for me, of when I first got introduced to the concept and started getting trained on coaching, which happened really informally at first. And it wasn't until this last academic year that I got some official training. For me, one of the downsides, kind of in a way, has been that I notice one-upping a lot more. I notice when people are one-upping me. I notice when they're not really listening. I notice when people give me advice or say me too, like it just really sticks out to me in a way that it didn't used to. And I also know that it aggravates me a lot more when people do that. So that's, I don't know, it's just an observation that that's kind of the price I guess I've had to pay at becoming a better coach, is that I get aggravated more when people want to. Okay. All right. I'm going to try to, I need to mess with this for a second. But I want to show this short video. It's about 5 minutes or so. And it's a coaching demonstration. Just give me a second to try to figure this out. Okay, can you see the video that I'm about to show? As I start it, you tell me if you can you hear me right now? Oh, okay. Just turn it up a little, make sure. You can see me though, right? All right, well, let us know if you can't see or hear this video.
Now you're going to see a demonstration, a short demonstration, as if we were in the hallway. We're working together. There's a conversation maybe that's happened previously around this, and we're running into each other in the hallway. Lori is my employee, and he's got something to chat about.
All right. Hey, Sydney, boy, I'm so glad I caught you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm on my way to a meeting. I've only got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, can I have the 5 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
You know that project I'm working on?
Okay, yep.
We talked about it before. It's going well, but I'm really having trouble with Frank.
Okay. Okay. What's the trouble that you're experiencing?
Well, first of all, we seem to clash. Like it almost feels like anytime I say something, he always seems to have to say something contrary, is what it feels like.
Okay, so contrary or one-upmanship, is it?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I just started to notice that, like, when we're offline, we seem to get along, but when we're in the room together, it's like, I don't know, but like he's different, and I'm just noticing, and I'm starting to.
So what does that bring up for you?
Well, it's bringing up for me, wow, I wonder if I've done anything wrong.
Okay.
Have I somehow pissed him off?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I guess that's.
So it sounds like confusion. Sounds like there's a place of confusion.
Definitely confusion, and I'm starting. I'm starting to be reluctant to speak up.
Oh, in the meetings.
Yeah.
So you're starting to hold back.
Yeah.
And kind of that's a big impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know who you are. You're someone that speaks up and has an opinion, and I want you to know that those opinions, they're really valued around here. So it's really important that you actually find that way to have your voice in this situation. Yeah, but
I don't. Yeah, I get. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you need in order to feel like you can really be yourself in those meetings?
It's so obvious, but I guess I'm noticing I'm even reluctant to speak it. But I need to talk to Frank.
Yeah. What is it you need to say to him?
The censored or the uncensored version?
Give it to me straight.
Like, what's up? Why do you keep shutting me down? That's what it feels like.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you think he's going to respond to that? Actually, here, let me tell you. I mean, so maybe you're giving me the uncensored version.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something I'm picking up about, like, well, to possibly give it to him in a way that he's going to be more receptive to it. Because.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
because I'm almost feeling like I'm attacking him.
yeah.
That's what I
so
want
what?
to do.
Yeah, it's what you want to do. Yeah, great noticing. And what's the thing that you can say to him that's going to enroll him into having that conversation with you?
Well, I guess the first thing would be to just say, "Hey, Frank, can we talk about just maybe grab lunch or something?"
Great. Yeah. Can we have a
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah, because actually, what's coming up as we're talking is, as I said to you, we actually do get along outside of the room.
Right. So great idea to have it as a conversation outside the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great insight.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So have that conversation with him. What are the key points that you want to cover in it?
A little lost here because I keep wanting to say, so Frank, why do you keep shutting me down? So I want to go.
Right. And we know that's not going to be effective.
Yeah.
What's the thing you want to get out of it?
That every time I open my mouth, I don't feel like I'm being somehow attacked or judged.
Right. So you want to have a sense of options, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? Doesn't feel like it didn't quite land.
But something is coming up for me. I could try this. I'm a little reluctant to, but I might say, maybe instead of like attacking him, say, "Hey, Frank, I'm noticing this is happening.
Yeah.
Have I done? Oh, I could. Okay. I
see
could
where this
do
is
it
going.
that
This is
way.
great.
Yeah, I could say something like, "So, have I done anything wrong?"
Right. So you can actually almost turn it
And
around.
open up the conversation that way.
Super.
Yeah.
And I heard you say a minute ago that you're feeling a little bit reluctant. Here's what I know about you. When you share what's really going on for you, it has a big impact. Like you're the kind of person who people stop and listen to. So, yeah, really, I'm really excited that you're choosing, consciously choosing to make this decision about how you're going to work with Frank and work this out. Yeah. Good. Okay. So, when are you going to have this conversation with him?
I'm gonna actually call him today and set it up for later in the week.
Okay. Will you drop me an email after you've had the conversation with him?
I will.
Okay. And if you don't, like if it's come to the end of the week and you haven't had the conversation, fire me an email.
I'll let you know.
Just to let me know that you didn't have it, but when you will have
Yeah.
it. Great. I look forward to hearing what happens.
Thanks for the 5 minutes.
Okay, good. Now you're going to.
Okay, let me get the power back. I just want to get the. Remember how I had the.
She said it's working.
Yeah.
Oh,
You remember I had the.
it's not changing for you.
Well, I just wanted to see the.
Oh, yeah.
I remember how I did that.
Just 1 second. We're having technical difficulties.
Yep. Okay, so that was for me, that's a really good short video that kind of encapsulates a full coaching session. Could maybe each person share like what was something that stood out for you in that video or something that you noticed the coach doing that connects to what we've been talking about?
To me, something that stood out was how she was able to use these skills to still guide the conversation without, I guess it wasn't just asking more questions, it was also guiding, but without putting her own perspective in.
Yeah, for sure. She let him drive how he was going to approach Frank. And so kind of going with that, she had a lack of attachment to the outcome. She let him drive what the outcome was going to be. But she held him accountable at the same time. So she was like, okay, send me an email, let me know when this happened and how it went. And that's something that we can do with our students too, as they're figuring out what they want to do for their leadership challenges or issues that they're dealing with. You can also give them that accountability and kind of hold them to what they say they're going to do and say, hey, just let me know how that conversation goes. Shoot me an email or a text or whatever.
Yeah, Andy, that was two things that really stood out to me, is that I appreciated how all of her questions really highlighted what the gentleman's role was in the challenge. So I think that was really powerful. I think it speaks to some of the themes that we've been surfacing. And then the other aspect of the example that really stood out to me was how she created a structure of accountability. I appreciated how she was inviting him to send her an email either way. And I thought that was an effective tool, something that I'll continue to think about as I do more coaching this semester.
Awesome. Thank you.
My favorite question that she asked was, what do you need to feel like you can be yourself? And that just to me was like kind of what I spoke about earlier, like giving them the power to become, and kind of, I think, echoing what you said, Brandon, that what can they do? Like the focus is on them as the subject of this, and that they hold the power and what they have control over. So I really liked that in that example.
Yeah, that was a really powerful question, because and another thing is you could tell that question kind of like he shifted his body language shifted, and kind of he's like, oh yeah, he just kind of it really stirred something up in him. That was a great, powerful question. So this is a slide. This is also in your coaching resources packet, and they have that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have this. I think it's a PDF file. But if you look at the slide, she actually went through everything on here. So she, the first part was the what is happening now. She's like, what's up? What's going on? And then he kind of shared about that. She asked him, what she wants or what he wants out of the relationship with Frank, or how he wants to resolve it, what he wants to achieve. She got him to explore options. What could you do? What do you need to feel like for you to be yourself? Or how could you approach Frank? And then let him talk through how he might approach it. And then the very last part, what will you do? That's kind of the accountability. So if you were to go back and rewatch that, and please feel free to do that. We're going to, if we haven't already, we're going to share the slides.
Yeah, we'll share the slides afterwards, and I'll send individual files with like the worksheet that's next, and also the coaching prep form.
Yeah, so you're going to get these slides and some other resources after this meeting is over. But I would encourage you to watch the video again. I've watched it a bunch of times, and you may pick out something new. But you can also see how the coach is able to go through all of these steps in 5 minutes. Your coaching sessions might last a half hour to an hour or even longer. So I know one of the things I'm probably going to do with the fellows that I'm coaching is I'll probably just have them over to my house for like a dinner or something, just to kind of get to know them. But in the following coaching sessions, I may try to walk through these things as we go through. Okay, and this is just a different way of looking at the GROW model or looking at a coaching session. And this is kind of an outline of what a coaching session would look like. And these are things, I don't necessarily have these as notes in front of me, but they're all things that I'm thinking about as we go through a meeting. I'm thinking about setting the agenda and letting the fellow really set that agenda. Making sure that what they, the challenge or issue that they're talking about, asking them how that aligns with their purpose or their values. And this is one of the ones that I struggled with as I went through coaching training, was exploring multiple interpretations. And the way that was manifested for me was whenever I was coaching someone and they were talking about an issue or challenge, it was really hard for me to let go of my own interpretation. So if you're like me, you're going to listen to a challenge or a situation and you're going to interpret it right away. And the skill of a coach is to explore multiple interpretations. And the first thing you want to do is get the student or fellow's interpretation. Like, what is your interpretation of the situation? By exploring multiple interpretations, I might ask, okay, that's one interpretation. What's another interpretation of that situation? Or what might be another person's interpretation? And then some great advice I got from a mentor coach was, usually our own interpretation, our own perspective is the noble one. And that we're on the noble side of whatever issue it is that we're dealing with. And my mentor coach challenged me to explore what's the not so noble interpretation. And that was really powerful for me as a way to explore multiple interpretations. So asking that question, and maybe even saying, okay, that's the noble interpretation. What's the not so noble interpretation? And then generating options. I think we saw that in the video too, where the coach kind of helped the person work through, okay, what are some things that you could do? And then the last two really go together, is kind of helping the person get ready to take action, saying, okay, what are you going to do? And then the accountability can be as easy as, okay, that's a great plan. And, could you let me know when you've had that conversation or when you've addressed that issue? And this might be something that happens over the course of a couple sessions, or it could happen all within one. If we're doing a really good job as a coach, then we're probably going to be able to get through this in one coaching session. But it depends on the issue too and the person. It could take more than one. We could spend an hour exploring multiple interpretations, in which case we may need to come back and have more sessions to talk about that issue. I'm just going to take a quick pause. Are there any questions at this point? Anything we need to explore maybe in more detail? We're getting close to our time boundary, and I just want to be respectful of all of your time, and give some space to kind of process what we've been talking about. I may kind of skip through some of these slides kind of to get to the end. But what I do want to say is that myself, Marcia, and Ashley, that we're here for you. and we're here to support you in this relationship that you're going to have with the fellows. And please know that we're here, and also that we want to hear from you, and we're probably going to check in with you throughout the academic year to make sure everything's going okay, and just to see if maybe we need another training session, or but I'm also here. My email is at the end of this PowerPoint, and I know most of you already know how to contact me, but I'm also here to help you with any of the issues, and I'm happy to offer coaching to any of you as you're working through these relationships. So I just wanted to say that. Okay, so we've already kind of hammered these points, although again, I just want to stress that what we're doing here today, really we can't consider it like formal coaching training. And this training isn't anything that's going to get you any closer to achieving a ICF credential. To do that, we would direct you to a certified coaching training center. The Kansas Leadership Center is one of those places. Really what we're trying to do with this training, our goal is to help you become more coach-like. And by that, I mean, we can still practice and utilize the skills of coaching. We can still hold our fellows up as whole people. And our hope is that in doing that and through this training, it's going to help you create a better relationship and a better partnership with the fellow that you're working with. So that's really our aim for this, is to kind of help all of us become more coach-like, and to kind of help create that coach-like atmosphere with the fellow. Because from our view, it's a great way to build and foster a really good relationship. Again, these are just some questions. These are questions I actually have in front of me whenever I'm doing a coaching session. And all of these questions are under, I guess, what I would call setting the agenda. So these are the 3 questions that I'm going to ask before every coaching session. And these are all part of setting the agenda. And sometimes these 3 questions take a really long time to get through. But I would just encourage you to go through these questions. This is just a great way to kind of start a coaching session. So, and letting the fellow start to set the agenda. So what do you want to focus on today? Or you could say, what do you want to work on today? And then after they say that, you'd say, okay, so at the end of our time together, what do you want to walk away? Or another way to say that is, okay, if we talk about that and we work on it, how are we going to know that we've been successful? And whatever they say about that question, this is how we're going to connect it back to the fellow's values, and maybe get them to think about, why these things are important. So what about that's important to you? Or if we do that, what's important about that? So I will have these 3 questions or some form of them kind of in front of me when I'm doing a coaching session, because I know I want to work through all these 3 questions first before I start doing any of the other things that we've talked about. One of the last coaching sessions I did, it took about, I want to say 20 or 30 minutes for me to get through all 3 of these questions. Just because oftentimes there's a lot to unpack, even just going through these 3 questions. But for me, this is how I set the agenda of a coaching session. and it also follows the GROW model as well. I'm just going to pause really quick. Are there any questions or thoughts about this? Okay, we're going to kind of move on, and I'm probably just going to flip through to the end. So I do have a few more slides, but I'm just going to kind of go through them really quick. The best questions are open-ended questions. They're not yes or no questions, and we want to ask powerful questions. And even in your coaching resources, there's a long list of questions. We're here to help you if you're having trouble coming up with questions, but just know that the best ones are open-ended, the ones that get the person you're talking to talk. The best questions are non-judgmental, they're non-leading. This is something I've really had to work on, asking questions like, well, have you thought about doing this? Or have you ever tried? And then, finish the sentence. Or you should really watch this documentary that I watched that really helped me. Like that. We also want to stay away from why questions. Why questions can be judgmental, and not always. You can ask questions like, well, why is that important? Or another way to say that is, what's important about that to you? But a why question can also be really leading. But they're like, why haven't you done this? That implies, like, the implication there is that, you're not a whole person. You're deficient in some way because you haven't thought about the thing that I just thought of. Again, I just want to kind of circle back to the stance. Your attitude towards the fellow really is super important. It's one of the first things we talked about. If all you do in your session is remember that the fellow is naturally creative, resourceful, a whole person, and remember to hold them in that unconditional positive regard, that's going to go a long way towards creating and co-creating a really solid relationship with the fellow. Also to remember to hold your focus and to be present. It's really easy to get distracted. That's why, I love Brandon's comment about kind of clearing everything away, putting your phone away, no distractions, closing your door, and just kind of, he said ritual, but having kind of creating the conditions where you can be present. And a lot of times for me, I notice if I'm not being present, or I notice myself getting distracted or kind of getting lost in my own thoughts. And when I notice that, I just like kind of inside my own head, I'm like, okay, we got to refocus and get back to what I need to get back to being curious. I need to get back to my coaching stance, and I need to be present. And it happens, the best thing to do in that situation is to, don't judge yourself. Don't get mad at yourself. Just get back to being present, and that's the best thing you can do. Some other notes just about being present and having presence, which is kind of a whole nother topic we could actually spend a lot of time talking about. And I'm happy to do that offline with anyone if they're interested in learning more about presence. But it really has to do with just kind of being in the moment and being with the fellow, and really being open to your own intuition, and releasing your judgments and releasing your interpretations. Sorry, we're kind of having to go through it. So has anyone's Now that we've kind of gone through how we view coaching, has your definition of coaching changed, or maybe your thoughts about it? I'll put myself on mute. Maybe each person can just go through and share how you're thinking about coaching. I know for some of us, we've had training course. Kim, do you mind starting us off?
Yeah. So I don't know if I would say changed, but definitely like more of a direction. And I think the one thing where I started and what I feel definite about right now is giving that space is just so important. And I'm pretty excited because I know that all of these things are things that are gonna help in my everyday work. So I'm pretty excited about that I get to practice this before meeting with my fellows. So that's exciting to me as well.
Awesome. I'm excited to see how this helps in your work and other aspects of your life too. That's really cool. Tracy, do you want to share maybe a couple thoughts?
Sure. This is my first formal introduction to this concept, so my definition has definitely changed. And I'm really excited about it. I'm stepping into a role where I'm going to be doing a lot of advisory work, and I am really thankful for all these skills that I'm excited to start practicing. Yeah, I agree. I think giving space and just working through, I think my big motto is going to be curious and just keep asking questions and giving space to figuring out problems.
Awesome. Can I ask you all if anyone has any specific questions about how this is going to work with the fellows, or any questions you have about working with the fellows, how this is going to look for the rest of the year?
I think I just have logistical, like when are they meeting for the first time? And I know you said we'll send you our bio and then get theirs and they will reach out first, but when do they kind of get started?
So they will get together. We're having a back to school barbecue the day before school starts, so on August 19th. So we'll give them sort of the orientation to coaching and those pieces that day. So within a week or so after that, we'll plan to reach out to you all again. We've kind of already started figuring out who is going to go with what coach, try to think strategically about backgrounds and who might be a good fit. So it'll be within the first 2 weeks of school starting, and then during the month of September, we want to be the first meeting. So they should be contacting you within the first couple of weeks of school as well to get that set up. And yeah, we'll be in touch with you several times between now and then too. So, but if any of you have specific questions or feel like you'd like more resources or anything along those lines, just give me a shout anytime, and we'll be sure to get everybody up to speed and feeling. We want you to feel comfortable, definitely. So.
Yeah. Tracy, any questions, or Katie or Brandon?
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you so much for your willingness to work with our students. It's going to be a really good year. It's a great group of students, so we're really excited to have you all on board. So thanks for hanging out with us today. And like I said, if you need anything, just let us know anytime. So we'll be in touch really soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for this session.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you all.
Mm-hmm.